I recently came across a featured article on Hacker News titled Cloud Services Like AWS or Google Cloud Platform May Be the Wrong Choice by Carl Sutt. The very first paragraph of which starts with, if you're an indie hacker, a bootstrapper, a startup, an agency or a consultancy, or just a small team building a product, chances are you are not going to need the cost and complexity that comes with modern cloud platforms. So today we're going to take a look at a solution that really addresses both of these points, the cost and complexity, and that's Google Cloud Run. Before we dive into that, you'll see in my billing account, my Google Cloud billing is my maximum amount for any given month. Last year or so has been 3 cents. On AWS, 45 cents forecast for the month, with the majority of that cost being Secrets Manager. And on Microsoft Azure, I'm running some workloads in Azure Cosmos DB, and I'll be paying 22 cents for the month. Okay. So I think if you're able to take advantage of serverless solutions, you can really address this cost component of it. And the second part of this is the complexity. And this is really where Google Cloud Run comes into the picture. So what we're going to do is we're going to build an application and operationalize it in Google Cloud Run and just see how easy it is to do it without the cost or the complexity. Okay, so what we're going to do is build a really simple web API application and push it up into Google Cloud Run. And we're going to create a .NET minimal web API. Okay. All right, so here in Visual Studio Code, what we can do is we can really take out some of this extraneous code for the purposes of our example. We aren't going to need any of this. Also won't need this. And what we can do here is just return hello world, and that's it. Now, Google Cloud Run does need us to provide two things. The first thing is we need to tell it where we need to listen on a specific port. The default, which is 8080. And when we configure the application in Google Cloud Run, we can use any port that we want, but the default is port 8080, so we'll just use 8080. Before we do anything else, let's test this. .NET Run. Our application is up. We hit it with curl, and we get our response. Perfect. Before we do anything else, let's add in a git ignore. And the second thing that we're going to need to provide Google Cloud Run is to give it a Docker file. So create a Docker file. Now, this Docker file is a really standard Docker file. If you go into the Docker documentation, there's a section here that shows you for, probably for every different application, a Docker file that you can use to create it. And we're going to use this method one, and I'll explain to you this method one. I already have a Docker file set up here, so I'm just going to grab this here and paste it. And this Docker file really just has three parts. The first part is setting up the build environment, and all it's doing is .NET restore, copying the files into the Docker container, .NET restore, .NET publish, and then we build the runtime, and we configure our entry point with our environment variables, and that's it. Okay. So now our application is ready to go. I already have a GitHub repository set up here. So all we need to do right now is to push this up into our repo. Oh, git init, that helps. Okay, and now, there we go. Git branch and main. And push it up. All right, so here is our application. Really simple API on port 8080 with our Docker file. And now in Google Cloud, okay, what we can do is just create a new service in Google Cloud Run. And if you already have a container image hosted somewhere, you can pull that container image. In our case, we're going to pull it from a source repository. And you set it up with Cloud Build. The first time you do this, you'll have to click this Manage Connected Repositories and connect your GitHub account. Mine's already been connected. So we just have to find our repo. Our repo is here. Okay, and if I want to mirror it, I can mirror it. I don't want to mirror it in Cloud Build, doesn't matter to me. Build configuration, build off of main, build type, Docker file, and you can specify the source location. So for example, if you have a monorepo set up, you can specify the path to your Docker file. Mine is just at the root, so I'm all set. So click Save. All right, so now it's already pulled in the name based off of the repository, which is perfect. And I can choose how I want my CPU to be allocated. For mission critical applications, you might want to have it always allocated. But for if you're an indie hacker, weekend hobbyist, CPU is only allocated during request processing. So this thing will scale down to 0. And just so we don't get a runaway environment, we set the maximum number of instances to 1. We're going to allow all traffic and allow unauthenticated invocations so we can hit this from a public endpoint. And you can see there's other options here. For example, like you can configure the port. We use the default 8080, but if you wanted to, you can use a different port. You can also connect Cloud SQL to this. So if you're running a SQL instance on Google Cloud, you can connect it really easily, connect to a VPC and so on. Here on the container, we also have the option to select the startup boost. And what this does is when the application starts up, you get a little bit of extra CPU compute for the application, which is really useful for .NET applications or Java applications, which are JIT compiled, right? So we've got everything set up with the default. You can tune this however you want. If you have environment variables, if you have secrets, you can reference your secrets from Google Cloud here. And all we have to do now is we click Create, and there it goes. So our container now, what Google Cloud Run is doing is Google Cloud Run is pulling the source from GitHub. It's building the container. It's putting the container image into, I think, somewhere in Google Cloud here. And it's going to spin up a container instance with our application momentarily. Okay, so our application is ready now. Just took a few minutes. And now if we copy this URL and we come back here, there you go. We're now hitting our application in Google Cloud Run. Simple as can be, right? Now, Google Cloud also has a feature where we can map a custom domain to this container, right? And it's really easy to do. So let's try this out. I just happen to have like this extra domain that I purchased recently. And what we're going to do is we just manage custom domains. And here we're going to add a mapping. What's really nice is that if you're using Google Domains, all your domains are listed here. So we're already here. So we're just going to call this API .charleschen.com and click continue. So this will generate a record that we have to place into our DNS records, and this will verify the domain, and then we can use the domain. All right, so here we have our CNAME record, and all we need is we need to map this API to this value here. So let's come in here, manage our DNS, and we say API, CNAME, and there we go. And we click save. So Google is usually pretty quick. So now let's try this. So not quite up yet, not quite up yet. So let's come back and take a look here. It takes a little bit of time. Done. So you can see here, it's still waiting for the certificate provisioning. It does take a little bit of time. But while it's doing that, what we can do is let's do this. Let's add the next revision to our application, okay? So just to see how easy this is, we're going to come back, and what we're going to do is let's add in the current date time, okay? So we're just going to add UTC now to our response, right? And what we do to create a new revision here, okay? We just have to push it up. Now, what's going to happen is Google Cloud Run is going to detect that there's a new revision, and it is going to pull it in, build it, and deploy it, right? So we grab this URL. Okay, so we're still deploying here. We'll just wait for this to finish. Okay, so our application has finished deploying the revision, and now we copy this URL again. And there we go. So every time we want to push up a new revision, all we need to do is push it into GitHub. And you can really easily set up different ways to do this deployment, but obviously, we just really kept it really simple here, but you can pick the branch that you wanted to pull the deployments off of. So for example, you can create a branch called release, and every time you merge from main into release, then you push a new revision into Google Cloud Run. So let's go back and take a look at our certificate. All right, now we are back in Google Cloud Run, and we can come back and look at our custom domains here. And we can see here that the domain has been provisioned, our SSL certificate has been mapped for us, and we're ready to go. So here, if we hit it now, we get our response, and we can still use the original direct URL as well. All right, so there we go. Now, once again, if we wanted to add another version, all we need to do and push this up. And once again, as soon as this happens, what Google Cloud Run will do is it's going to pick that up, and it's going to initiate another build and deploy version 3 for us. So you can see just how easy it is to build applications with Google Cloud Run. You don't have to do anything special. You can use, this is just normal, regular .NET 6 web APIs. I can use whatever middleware I want to use. I can use whatever libraries I want to use. All I need to send this up is I need to provide a Docker file that lets Google Cloud Run know how to build and operationalize my application, push it into GitHub, and connect my GitHub repository to Google Cloud Run. And you can see here the application has detected that there's a new revision, and it's starting to build the revision now. And it's going to build and deploy this new revision momentarily. Okay, so there we go. This looks like it's done. Let's give it a try. Wow, look at that. So the startup time with the CPU boost is pretty good. It looks like it's just under, maybe around 2 seconds, which is pretty impressive for a .NET 6.5 application. I expect with .NET 7 AOT, it would be even faster. So I think it's already pretty good. Um, while we're here, though, let's take a look at some of the other options, that we have for our container. So, at any time you can come back and edit your deployment configuration. And let's say, you want a bigger instance, you can select a bigger instance. So I want a 1 GB instance instead. And I want, 2 CPUs. Totally fine. All you have to do is change the configuration. The concurrency, .NET is a multi-threaded runtime, so we can set the concurrency up to, I think it's 1,000 requests per container. And of course, we can tune the request timeout as well in our number of instances. And once we're happy, we can redeploy it, right? So it's really easy to manage the application. Once you've deployed it, you can see all of the metrics and runtime information about your instance here. You even have really easy access to the logs. So, whatever you're writing out to console, you're going to get the logs output here as well. So why don't we give that a try? Let's do a console write line here. Come back to, come on, Mac. Come back to our program here. And here, all right, so we've added a log message here. And we'll just add this here. Okay, push this up. And we come back here. So again, it takes a couple of moments for Google Cloud Run to pick this up. So you can see it's already picking this up and it's already starting to build and deploy it. It might take a couple of moments. All right, so our application's finished deploying. So we can try it again now. And here we are. We hit it again. And now if we come back into the logs, we'll see our log message here. And every time we come in and hit it again, our log messages will be updated. There we go. And we get our next message. So I hope you can see through this experience, Google Cloud Run is a really fantastic technology for, platform choice. For hobbyists, it's actually, I think, the exact opposite of Carl Sutt's experience. In fact, using Google Cloud Run is probably one of the easiest and fastest ways, if you're an indie hack or a bootstrapper or a startup, to build applications with low cost and low complexity because you're only paying for the invocations. The free grant for Google Cloud Run is quite generous. And the complexity comes down to exposing a known port and assigning and creating a Docker file and then pushing that up into GitHub. Google Cloud Run just takes over after that and operationalizes your application. Now, the next question that comes up quite often then, if you read through this thread, is then what do you do about storage? What do you do about your database? What do you do about secrets? Well, the real key here is to use all of these serverless options that are available. So either you use serverless, pay-as-you-go options on Google Cloud, or you use options, like Supabase, right? So Supabase has a free tier as well. So if you're just building a hobby project or you're a startup and you don't know how big your application is going to be, why not just start with this free tier? You get 500 megabytes of storage in a Postgres database and tons of bandwidth and files to get started. So, to recap, I think Carl's take here and a lot of the folks in this thread, if you're using these cloud platforms like AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure, and you're using the virtual machine options like EC2, yeah, there's going to be cost and complexity. But if you take advantage of this, current generation of serverless container runtimes, you can build applications really quickly with low cost, low complexity, and operationalize them within minutes. Okay.